So where we started, all the way back at lesson one, was this unknown romancing. I shared with you the story of Fred and how his neglected life of the heart contributed to his affair that brought him into my office with his marriage on the brink of divorce. And like Fred, we also don't necessarily need more knowledge about God, but to grow in our intimacy with God. And so that was one of the key features, themes of the series was how do we grow in our intimacy with God? And then how do we recover our hearts along the way? What if the desires of our heart were placed there by the one who was wooing us? Well, we have the romance, and those desires. Lesson two made the point that there's two things that pierce the human soul. One is beauty, one is affliction. And so arrows are those afflictions of life, the heartache and pain, the disappointments, the grief, the tragedies, whether big or small, are those arrows. And sometimes these arrows are what things that are done to us, the presence of the negative. Sometimes these arrows come from what was not done, the absence of the positive. We ended that lesson with the parable of the wheat, that God in his wisdom allows both the wheat and the tares to grow simultaneously at this time. The romance and the arrows coexist, at least for now. Lesson three then dealt with the wildness of God. And so how can we trust such a wild God? Wildness here meaning untamed, outside of our control, not bound by formulas. He's unpredictable. And so with the story of Lucy from Chronicle of Narnia, how can we trust such a wildness of God? And so we'd be nervous to meet such a wild God, to fall into the hands of such a living God. But again, as the point was made there, while he's not safe, he is good. And so we can trust in his goodness, even though he is wild. Lesson four then dealt with God as the ageless romancer. And so while he is wild, he had us in mind before the creation of the world. And despite our spiritual adultery, wounding the vulnerable heart of God, through our betrayal, he still sent his son to take on flesh and live among us, to win our hearts back to him. And so he humbled himself for our sakes. Lesson five dealt with our identity. So how do we see ourselves in relationship with God? And so like in marriage, our intimacy with God can also be strained if we're not thinking rightly about ourselves. We gave the story, the children's story of You Are Special with the Wimmicks, who went around putting gold star stickers on everyone or gray dot stickers on everyone. And so part of our task is to learn how to accept God's identity, what he has told us, what he has bestowed on us as our true self, and not the many labels that other people, including ourselves, try to give us. And he has called us his beloved. It's like the depths of intimacy reserved just for husband and wife. God desires and makes available this level of intimacy with us as well. And then finally last week, we dealt with the adversary and less wild lovers. So a reminder that our story does have an enemy who seeks to kill, steal, and destroy the very life that Christ came to give us. And this is often done by disconnecting us from the heart, from the life of our heart. So we must resist him. And resisting the temptation, resisting him also includes resisting the temptation to settle for those less wild lovers, our ways of control and order and indulgence. That while we're looking for God, we often settle for those cheap imitations that seem more manageable and safe. We use the image of Vanity Fair from Pilgrim's Progress, that we have to go through Vanity Fair. We must choose God over and against these all other things. And so we have those temptations, and there's a part of the journey that we must face those temptations, but we're choosing God over and against all those other things. And we ended last week with praying Ephesians 3. That we may know how wide and long and high and deep the love of Christ truly is, and that we may be filled with all the fullness of God's presence in our lives. And so trying to bring things home this week on the road, how do we have eyes for the romance? And so we've set out on this journey to become pilgrims of the heart. But how does this play out in our daily lives? How do we interpret the mundane flat tires and toothaches? Those unhelpful customer service phone calls, when our plans get rained out, not to mention the more weightier matters such as cancer or sexual struggles or a loved one just deciding to walk out of our lives. How do we interpret, how do we make sense of those things? Part of what drew me to this series as a Christian counselor is that I don't have the luxury to present sanitized theological concepts to my clients, however true, that I have to wade into the messy realities of their life. And so on a daily basis, they bring the raw, messy, heartbreaking stories into my office, and we have to listen together. All right, what is God up to in this? And so I can tell them something that's true, but if it's divorced from their everyday lives, then it doesn't land, it doesn't resonate. And so a large part of my work is helping clients interpret their stories. What is the best possible way to interpret this, to make sense of this, to move forward? How can we look for God in the midst of all your messy, broken aspects of your story? How we interpret our lives, how we interpret our stories makes a difference. Interpretation matters. Who is Jesus? And so some, let's say, he's just a good man and a wise teacher. That's one interpretation. Or maybe he's the Son of God and one who holds all things together by the power of his word. And so the same person, but how we interpret it makes a difference. Our interpretation matters. My story. And so around the age of 25, I was just started grad school, or was in grad school for a couple of years by that point, but still living with my parents, and was ready to leave. And so took a road trip around the Southeast, tried to figure out, all right, God, what are you up to? What is this next step in my journey? And through that time, it's like, okay, let's join the police academy. And anyone who knew me at that time, and as I came back home from that road trip and shared it with friends and family, they all gave me that bewildered look of, we don't understand. And truth be told, it's like, I didn't really get it as well. I didn't grow up around law enforcement. This was not something that was part of my story, but I had a strong sense that this was the path that God was calling me to. And so came and applied here to one of the local counties here in the metro area, got accepted, and joined the academy. Within 3 weeks of being in the academy, quickly realized that my lack of experience with firearms was then exposed. And so then got recycled, did some remedial training, but even that still was not enough. Within 6 months, I was then separated from the academy. And so now I've left my parents' house here in a new city, don't know anyone, 6 months in, and now I'm out of a job. Okay, well, now what do? God, did I misunderstand you? Did I not hear correctly what you told me to do? But at this point, I'm without a job, and my choice is now either to move back in with my parents or, again, find another job. And so I'm now applying for countless other positions to no avail. Many applications, very few interviews. Some of the interviews, again, they were saying essentially that I was overqualified. One in particular said, we're looking for someone more long-term, and we see that you're not going to be here long-term. We see the direction that you're going in your life, and you're not going to be here long-term. And that, in some ways, was encouraging, that he saw my greatness, as it were. I'm like, I still need to eat today. I have bills to pay today. We can deal about the future, but can I eat today? I didn't have the language at the time, but this is where I was starting to be introduced to the wildness of God. So this was a type of initiation. Will you trust me? And so I went through 2.5 years of unemployment. And in hindsight, I can now start looking back and interpret, all right, God, what were you up to there? I can see it now as an initiation. I can see it as a job training, that he was preparing me, laying a foundation. So the people I was exposed to, the things I was able to continue studying and diving into, that has laid a strong foundation that is serving me well to today. That again, with hindsight, I can look back and see God was putting me in position for greater. And there's more details that are beyond the point of this class, but I can see God was putting me in position for greater at that time. But it was here that my training to start interpreting the events of my life started to take root. How do I interpret this? I can interpret it simply as failure, disappointment, tuck my tail between my legs, so go back home, take any job. All right, God, you've not called me to this, and so let me just find any job just to make ends meet. But at that time, starting to listen, to discern, all right, God, what are you up to? And all right, I'm going to trust your wildness. It helped being young and single, so I didn't have a family to take care of at the time. So I was more bold in trusting some of that wildness, but all the same, that was part of my initiation into this journey of the heart. And so the journey of the heart starts with a single step of faith into the unknown. And so Abraham, called to leave his native country to a plan that God was going to show him. Without necessarily knowing where he was going, he was still called. And the text tells us that he was called at the age of 75. And so he's not a young man. And so it's not too late for us either. So sometimes, all right, yeah, that sounds good, but maybe if I had picked that up, or the first half of life would be different. But again, Abraham was called at 75. And so whether we're on the first half of life or the second half of life, when God calls us into this adventure for us to be able to answer. And it is an adventure. So it's not a paint by numbers approach to life. All right, do this, and then have a perfectly executed plan on the other side. Sometimes clients come in for premarital or right before they're starting their parenting journey, and they want to know some tips like, how do we prepare for this journey? And sometimes what they're asking for is that detailed plan, all right? Is there a paint by numbers approach that we can adopt so that we can avoid all the hardships and struggles that come? It's like, no, there's not. Like these are adventures, and the only thing that prepares you for the adventure is the adventure itself. And so once you get into marriage prepares you for marriage. Like, it's helpful to go to premarital counseling, it's helpful to read the books, it's helpful to do all of that, but the only thing that truly prepares you for marriage is marriage itself. The only thing that truly prepares you for parenthood is parenthood itself. And the same in our spiritual life. The only thing that truly prepares us is the journey itself. And so we have to take this step of faith into the unknown, knowing that nothing will ever be the same again. Abraham left all what was familiar to him. And so we also have to let go of all those things that brought us life. As we mentioned last time, letting go of those things, romance comes through the things that capture our heart. They're not in them. So we have to let go of our various attachments in this life to open to God himself. Dragons and nits. Life comes with many challenges, both big and small. And much of this we can see as just a normal ups and downs, the random luck of this life, and time and chance, as the Ecclesiastes writer puts it. And our adversary will often take advantage of these moments and try to put a spin on things for us to lose heart. So dragons are those big traumatic events of life that shake our faith to the core. So this is the cancer diagnosis, the infidelity, the divorce, the death of a child. Whatever it looks like, there's no denying the presence in our life. So our world is completely turned upside down when the dragons are present. The nits, on the other hand, are those relatively small nuisances that wear us down over time, or when they seem to happen all at once. So this is that death by 1,000 paper cuts. And so the flat tire, the broken pipes, the canceled appointments, and the like, there's nothing particularly earth-shattering by them, but it's easy to grow weary with them when it feels like we're always having something to deal with. To be sure, evil can use both the dragons and the nits to cause us to lose heart and distrust God's goodness toward us personally. But in many ways, it is easy for us to guard against the dragons because they are obvious, they're clearly seen. And it's easier for others generally to support us in this moment. And so when we're in a car wreck, when we're going in for major surgery, it's not uncommon to say, hey, will you pray for me because we're going through these things. We generally don't ask for prayers for paper cuts. And so this is what makes those nits generally more effective in taking out, because we don't have the resources. We're not asking for help. We tend to dismiss them, explain them away as just coincidences, but their constant nagging then eventually leaves us discouraged and on the verge of despair. Back to interpretation. It would be a mistake to assume that all our hardships, all our wounds are spiritual attacks from evil. Sometimes the hardships that we're facing is part of God's refining work in our lives. And so I've had clients come distraught over their marriage, facing a Christ in their faith because they're praying for God to change their marriage or to remove some unwanted the desire that they might have. And God didn't do it. It's like, all right, why didn't God remove it? I've prayed for that. This seems like a good thing. I'm praying for something good. Why is not God removing that in the way that I would like it? And sometimes it seems that God allows us to be wounded in particular areas to take us deeper into the heart of the issue. And if God simply fixed it, all right, I'm just going to fix your marriage, all right, now you're not growing. And part of his task, part of his desire is for us to be conformed to the image of Christ. And if you just fix the marriage, now we're not going through that refining process. There's some of those unwanted things, as Paul talks about, the thorn in the flesh. Sometimes God allows for things for our own healing, for our own growth, so that we can trust in his grace even more. And so here again, we must pray for the eyes to see. When we're faced with various wounds and afflictions, is this evil that we need to resist? Or is this a work of the great physician, wounding us in order to bring healing? And so we're on the road. What do we bring along with us on this road? This is the journey that we're taking, and I think very fitting imagery of progress. And so we're taking that narrow path that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. That the journey is difficult and long, but here we go. What do we take with us? Part of what we take is desire itself, but not desire simply for the junk stuff and things of this life. And so it's not for I just want a boat. I just want a pay raise. I just want to take a vacation. There's nothing wrong with those things. But our deeper desire is for more life itself. Christ came that we may have life and have it to the full, to have it abundantly. John 10:10. This is coming from George MacDonald playing off that passage. In a word, he came to supply all our lack from the root outward. For what is it we need but more life? What does the infant need but more life? What does the bosom of his mother give him but life in abundance? What does the old man need, whose limbs are weak and whose pulse is low, but more life, which seems ebbing from him? Weariness and feebleness, he calls upon death, but in reality it's life he wants. More life is the unconscious prayer of all creation. And so we want more life. But the lie is that things will never change. That will always be this way, and so we stop desiring, we stop wanting more. We assume that this is the way that it will always be. And so John 5:6. Go ahead and turn there. Afterward, Jesus returned to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish holy days. Inside the city, near the sheep gate, was a pool of Bethesda with 5 covered porches. Crowds of sick people, blind, lame, or paralyzed, lay on the porches. One of the men lying there had been sick for 38 years. When Jesus saw him and knew he had been ill for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" It's a question of desire. What do you want? And so at first blush, it would seem clear of what he wants. That I'm here, I'm sick, like this. It seems clear of what I want. Why are you asking this question of what is it that you want? It seems that Christ is getting at his desire. What is it that you want? And borrowing from this is how I often start my counseling sessions. When clients come in, I don't make assumptions of this is what you need. I ask the question, what do you want? Why are you here? What do you want to see different as a result of being here? I'm trying to get at the desires, because I can't help you if you don't want something. If you want something, then all right, we can figure out how to move there. But if you don't want anything, then again, I can't help you. The journey starts with desire. As you think about your Christian life, what do you want to see different? Have you settled for complacency in the name of contentment? How would you answer that question? What do you want when it comes to your spiritual life, when it comes to your Christian walk? What is it that you want? So there's a place for contentment, but there's also a place for unending desire and a hunger for more of the life that God has for us. And so part of what you need to bring with you on this journey is desire. Also, imagination. Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us, coming from Ephesians. What are we allowing ourselves to dream about? And so is being saved simply sufficient? That, all right, I've went through the steps of salvation, I'm saved, like that's it, that's the end. What are you allowing yourself to imagine? Are you allowing yourself to imagine an irreplaceable role in God's story, in God's kingdom? And what would you do if you were fully convinced that God was with you? And so how are you cultivating your imagination? Another way of saying this is, how are you cultivating the vision that you have for your life? So again, have you just settled with, all right, I have my 2.5 kids, my retirement is in place, I'm good. I'm not envisioning anything more. I'm not dreaming for anything more. Can we outdream God? The text says, no, like whatever you can imagine, like God is able to do immeasurably more than that. All right, here's what I could imagine. So how do I be very generous, bold in my imaginations, knowing that God can still out-imagine anything that I can come up with? But somewhere we struggle in our imagination, perhaps, is because we have not been exposed to enough beauty. And so think on those things that are pure and lovely, excellent and worthy of praise. Paul tells the Philippians, beauty would certainly fit this bill. This is the beauty of nature and music and good books. And so these allow us to exercise our imaginations toward what is true and good. But we live in a world, society in which we are bombarded daily by many dark and sinful images. And so this then shapes our imagination toward darkness. We're shaped by the darkness because that's what we're exposed to. And so we have to be very intentional. Okay, how do we feast on regular doses of beauty? Because that's part of the healing for our soul. And so if all we're doing is watching the news cycles, if all we're doing is watching the headlines, if it bleeds, it leads. Like if that's all we're consuming on, then our imaginations are then shaped toward the darkness of this world. And that's part of the enemy's tactics to take us out. Because if we can get our imaginations in that direction, now we're already done. All right, how do we feast on the beauty that God has created so that our imaginations can be then shaped toward the good? We must also take with us memory. So as Paul tells us in Romans, the things that are written beforehand are written for our learning. And so being able to go back through Scripture and learn about the stories of Daniel and Joseph and all the saints of old. All right, if David was able to face those Goliath, then again, that has helped shaping my imagination. What do the giants look like in my lives? If those Hebrew boys were able to endure that fiery flame of the furnace, all right, what can I endure today? And so that helps me to have an imagination by remembering the faithfulness of God, even from the past, but also in the lives of each other today. And so how are we sharing our stories with each other? I think that came out a couple of weeks ago of part of our testimony and confession. How are we sharing our stories with each other? Because that helps us remember, no, this is the God we serve. He did this in your story. He did this in my story. And we're sharing that with each other. And then certainly reflecting on his faithfulness even in our own lives. So journaling. As I told you my story going through the academy, around that time, a little before, I started keeping a journal. So being able to go back and reflect through that. All right, here's the things that God has brought me through personally. So this is not someone else removed. This is what God has done in my story. And so when I forget, I have a written record of that to remember because our memories fail. And so like Lord's Supper, do this in remembrance of me. Like, why is he telling us to remember? We often forget. And so we need regular reminders of these things. And so part of what you need to take with you on your journey is memory. How you capture God's faithfulness, how you capture the goodness, and recall it on a regular basis. And then finally, patience and courage. To be kind to yourself as you grow without giving up the journey. So the point of this series is not to add yet one more thing to your Christian to-do list. And so it's more important to think fresh, to borrow that model, that phrase, to think fresh about a Christian life and a life with God. But this renewal of our minds, the transformation of our hearts is a journey. It is a process. And so how do we be patient in that journey? And so as you plant a tree, it's like that tree doesn't grow overnight. As you're raising your kids, the kids don't grow. How do you be patient in that journey? That sometimes we may beat ourselves up for not being farther along or moving as quickly as we might like. But how do we be patient as you grow and learn to put these things into practice? But along with that patience, how do we be very courageous in not giving up the journey? Do not grow weary in doing good. At just the right time, Paul says, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. All too often we don't have the patience. We rush into things, and so we don't wait. Or in waiting, we give up. Like, we're doing good, but I'm not able to seem to make progress as quick as I would like. And so, all right, I guess I'm done. And so how do we have both patience and courage on this journey? We're called to be disciples who make disciples. And so the recovery of our own hearts is not just for our own sakes, but for others as well. So in as much as, yes, I want you to recover your own heart, some of this is for others. And so whose heart are you battling for? Who else can you take this message to? And so if we want to draw others close to the heart of God, then we must do so ourselves. We must remember our first love. We must remember that passion and intimacy is available with God in order to invite others to do the same. If what they see is just a dry, sterile faith, that's not very attractive. And so, yes, we need to be faithful, obedient servants of God, but he's also called us his beloved. And so how do we convey that, reflect that in our own lives so that we can then battle for the hearts of others? Let's illustrate some of this point. I'll read some from the Sacred Romance. The word know has been captured in service of the intellect. And so when we think about knowing God, images of learning more about him immediately come to mind. With a sigh, we consider what book we might buy or what Bible study we might attend to understand more clearly God's attributes. But what if, just using this example of the cafe lovers, what if we're sitting in a sidewalk cafe overhearing the following exchange between a fiancé and his betrothed? She: I'm looking forward to our wedding day. I do love you so much. I really wish I could see more of you. There's so much about you I want to know better. He replies, yes, dear, I know. I'm going to send you a book that describes more about my life. I'm sure you get a lot out of it. She: I'll be glad to read it, but I just want to hold your hand. She continues somewhat mischievously, I just want to kiss you. He replies, I'm sure you do, beloved. Let me send you a tape describing the role of physical affection at the different stages of courtship. You'll find it worthwhile, I'm sure. Her, being somewhat disappointed, that's wonderful, darling. It's just, there's to look forward to our wedding day. I want to be with you so badly. I think about us being, together, day and night. He replies, yes, intimacy is important. I'd like to send you to a weekend seminar. That should really be quite helpful. At this point, as he says, what is Steph? This guy has no clue how to love a woman. How much that describes our Christian life. Contrasting that, skipping a little bit, excerpt between another conversation between two lovers. The lover: how beautiful you are, my darling. Oh, how beautiful. Your eyes are like doves. The beloved: how handsome you are, my lover. Oh, how charming. Our bed is verdant. Lover: show me your face. Let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your face is lovely. Your mouth is like best wine. The beloved: may the wine go straight to my lover, flowing gently over lips and teeth. I belong to my lover, and your desires for me. Come, my lover, let us go to the countryside. Let us spend the night in the villages. For you who are good Bible students know that is coming from the Song of Solomon. And so which describes our Christian life up to now. That when we think about this sacred intimacy with God, is it more of this cool, distant lover that, all right, yes, here's a book, and here's a Bible study, and here's a weekend seminar. Nothing is wrong with that, but is that our life with God? That's just this cool, distant, that we're not really passionate, intimate lovers with God? Or are we like that second couple that is that passionate intimacy? Why did God give us a Song of Psalms? And so, yes, that is for our learning, and there's a lot that can be said there about marital sexual intimacy. But again, marriage and sex is also just a picture of God's relationship with us. I tell you mystery, Paul says, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. And so here's an image. This is the passion and intimacy that God desires with us. And so what would you like to reflect in your next chapter, your next mile of this journey? We must live with hope, coming from Hebrews 11. And so those who were the heroes of the faith, but then picking up in verse 35, others were tortured, refused to turn from God in order to be set free. For they placed their hope in a better life after the resurrection. So they live with hope, that sometimes God comes through and rescues us from a human perspective in the way that we like. He saves us from the lion's den. He saves us from the fiery furnace. At other times, our story in this life ends in tragedy, but how do we still live in hope? Our hope has to transcend the outcomes of this life. Our hope has to be in Christ himself, that is for the restoration of all good things. And so even if we don't see it in this life, we can still live with hope. And so we live with an open desire, not for perfect fulfillment in this life, but by faith we look forward to this restoration of all good things. And then finally, remember, repent, and do. To remember to interpret your life from the perspective of God's larger story. Interpretation matters. Set your mind on things above, not on things on earth. So you must let go of, or otherwise see through your small stories. And some things we need to truly let go of, they have no role for us. But again, as we've been making the point, those things that have our attachment are just a reflection, an icon of something greater. So can you at least put it in its proper place, that even if this thing is in my life, I'm not attached to it in the same way. I've not made it an idol, and I can see through it. So I can enjoy it, but I'm seeing through it to the fullness of God's story. And then live by faith, anchored in hope, fully convinced that God is with us, that the best is still yet to come for us to dream on. Again, the slides are there. Thank you for allowing me to have this time with you for the 7 weeks. I will pray, and then we will be dismissed. Father, we love you, we praise you. We thank you for the chance to come together to reflect on your sacred romance, what you've invited us into. Thank you for the deep desires that you've placed in our hearts. Help us to keep these desires alive and open to you, despite the many arrows that might come our way. You are the living God, totally outside of our control. This wildness often makes us nervous and fearful. But give us the grace to trust you more, to know your heart toward us is good. And may we remember our true identity as your beloved. And give us the eyes to see and resist the schemes of the evil one who seeks to steal, kill, and destroy the life you sent your son to give us. Guide us toward your true goodness, not to settle for control on our terms or the cheap imitations of this world. This road is long and difficult, but we will set our minds and hearts on you. Learn to practice resting in your presence throughout our daily lives as we look forward to all good things you still have in store for those who love you.